Alleluia, Alleluia. Everybody sing Alleluia, for the Lord has risen, it is true. Everybody sing Alleluia. 30 years he walked the land. Alleluia, Alleluia. To all in need he lent his hand. Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia. Everybody.
This is the fourth video that I've done this year on how the Novus Ordo Mass is illicit. If I don't convince you with this video, I suggest that you go back and watch the last three. One of the points that I made is that the Latin Mass goes back to Antiquity. It didn't just start in the 1500s. According to Father J.B. O'Connell in his 1940 book, The Celebration of the Mass, the new Missal of Pope St. Pius V did not introduce a new rite. Its compilation was a reform and consisted of the codification of the traditional rubrics and a correction of the texts, and in securing agreement between the Missal and the newly reformed Roman Breviary. And this is the consensus of all the literature I found on the subject before the Second Vatican Council. So if anyone tells you that the Latin Mass only began with Pope St. Pius V, and that it has had multiple revisions of any consequence since then, that person is either a liar or that person is misinformed, and there is no other option. In the last three videos, I provided quotes from the Council of Trent, Pope St. Pius V's Quo Primum, and Pope St. Pius X saying how the Mass could not be changed in any significant way, much less concocting an entire new rite. In his book, At the Altar, published in 1926, Father Dom Ernst Graf wrote, "A commission was appointed, but it terminated its labors only during the pontificate of Pope Pius V. On July 14, 1570, the Holy Pontiff published the bull which we still read at the beginning of our missals, and it commands that the Mass shall be sung or said according to the rite and manner and standard which is given in this missal, nor in celebrating shall anyone dare to add or recite other ceremonies or prayers than those that are contained herein." Nowadays, some people might try to con you and say that Quo Primum wasn't a big deal. However, Quo Primum was still included in missals well into the 20th century. I want to thank Athanasius Urbanus and Hugh Lee Nugent for sending me screenshots of missals that had included Quo Primum. So it was important enough to be included as a caution in missals to modernists almost 500 years after it was promulgated. For this video, I surveyed periodicals from before the Second Vatican Council to see whether Catholics generally understood that the Mass could not be changed, or at least not licitly. First, let's talk about the canon of the Mass. The last real change to the Latin Mass was to the canon, and it was under Pope St. Gregory the Great. The canon is the priest's silent prayer. The Novus Ordo Mass not only overhauled the canon of the Mass by changing its words and making it noisy, it doesn't even bother calling it the canon anymore. In 1872, the Northern Ohio Journal wrote of the unchangeable canon of the Mass. Strange But True was an illustrated feature that was syndicated in Catholic papers all across North America, and it ran for 30 years. This illustration appeared in 1942. It says, "The Church's reluctance to alter the canon of the Mass caused the refusal to include even St. Joseph's name when growth of popular devotion to him invoked the request in 1850. But then came the Second Vatican Council. In 1969, the Las Vegas Sun wrote, "Pope Paul VI, through Ecumenical Council Vatican II, changed the unchangeable, the Mass canon." But not only was the canon unchangeable, the entire Mass was untouchable. In 1910, the Irish Standard wrote, "The Church speaks Latin, therefore not only because she is apostolic, unchangeable, and Catholic, but also because she is one. Changing language in the liturgy would seem to break the link with the past and raise some suspicion of innovation in what is expressed in the liturgy, while having retained the same ancient language indicates that the Church, which continues to use it, is the very same as old, and that she has not changed in any essential matter, having been so careful as to not even change her language, which, compared with doctrine, is of much less importance." 2 years later, in 1912, the Rochester Catholic Journal, which, by the way, eventually became Fulton Sheen's newspaper, wrote, "Perhaps through ignorance, non-Catholics find fault that Latin is employed in the Mass and other services. They affect to wonder why English or the language of the country should not be used. The answer is obvious, or it should be. The sacrifice of the Mass is unchanged and unchangeable. Hence, the language should be unchanged as nearly as possible. Moreover, it should be the same the world over, so that every worshiper may be able to assist no matter where he may find himself. So, the sacrifice of the Mass is unchanged and unchangeable. Then in 1926, the Uniontown Register wrote of the Eucharist as one unchanging act of belief and devotion common to all Catholics of all races and nations under the sun. Yet Paul VI even had the audacity to change the words of consecration in his Mass in order to better fit with ecumenism. The concept of ecumenism, by the way, is another rupture with the consistent teaching of the Church prior to the Council. In 1941, the Ludington Daily News, along with other newspapers, printed a syndicated article. It said, Latin, a language known by all cultured people in the long centuries of Christianity, was adopted by the Western Church as the logical language for the sacred liturgy. Latin, now a dead language, unchanging and unchangeable, is indeed the logical language for the Church, which has ever been changing and unchangeable in its basic worship and teachings. So according to this article, the Church has always been unchanging in its worship and teaching. In 1948, the Forest Park Review featured a question and answer about Mahatma Gandhi's cremation and asked about the Church's attitude toward cremation. I won't read the entire answer here, but the priest summarizes with the Catholic position and concludes that the Church cannot be expected to change her sacred liturgy for the fads of the time. But not only did the Novus Ordo Church change its liturgy for the fads of the time, it also changed its teaching on cremation. Instead of forbidding it, the Novus Ordo Church now merely discourages it. In 1956, the Albuquerque Journal wrote of the Mass as being an unchangeable religious rite. As late as 1957, the Long Beach Independent wrote of the unchanging ritual of the Mass, which is a continuation of Christ's sacrifice on Calvary. Over the last 4 videos, we've demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Novus Ordo Mass is illicit. Its establishment was unlawful. So, what does God think of the Novus Ordo Mass? According to St. John of the Cross, God is offended by all that is unlawful. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back again within a week with another one. But in the meantime, please check out my Facebook page and my Twitter page. Every day I post additional content that you won't find on this YouTube channel. And also, please pray for the Church.